10,000 feet over the Nevada high desert. The sky is a flawless, sharp blue. But Delta IV is spinning on its own axis. A UH-60 Black Hawk of the U.S. Army. Out of control. The rotor washes a violent vibration. Getting stronger. The pilot's voice comes through the radio, torn by static. Mayday, mayday. Lateral control failure. The system is unresponsive. In the control tower at Fort Rucker, Alabama, Warrant Officer Maya Reed watches the monitor. The telemetry numbers scroll past. No one else notices. But she does. She knows them. She recognizes them. It's a critical anomaly in the stabilization system. A flaw she had reported years ago. A flaw no one had listened to. From across the room, the confident voice of Colonel Haskins cuts through the tension. Maintain the maneuver, Delta IV. Everything is under control. But it wasn't. And she knew it. Maya closed her eyes. Took a breath. She wasn't supposed to intervene. But she also knew something else. If she stayed silent, that young man would never touch the ground again. And so, she spoke. But before we get back to that critical moment, drop a comment and let us know where you're listening from. It's always amazing to see how many different places you all tune in from. And if you appreciate stories that stick with you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. It takes you a second. For us, it means everything. And now, let's find out how it all began. Maya Reed lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of Dayton, Ohio. Every evening, she'd put on her work coveralls, walk out in silence, and catch the bus. Destination, a logistics warehouse. Night shift. Hours passed between high bay shelves, fluorescent lights, boxes to be moved, and barcodes to be scanned. Precise. Punctual. Invisible. Her coworkers called her the ghost. Always on time. Always quiet. No one knew who she really was. No one knew that for 6 years, Maya had been an Army aviation mechanic. A specialist. Trained at Fort Eustis. 300 hours as a technical flight evaluator. Then, a letter arrived. One line only. Services no longer required. Honorable discharge, immediate effect. No thank you. No goodbye. She had left it all in silence. The base. The flight suit. The sky. Every morning, before sleeping, she'd make a coffee. She'd watch the helicopters fly over the city. Some landed at the medical center. Others, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. She'd just watch them, in silence. Her hands still stained with grease. Hardened. Precise. And she'd think. I was there. And no one knows. It was a Tuesday like any other. Maya was coming home from the night shift. Her hands were cold, her backpack heavy. Under the door, a white envelope. The Department of the Army letterhead. The sender, U.S. Army Aviation Center of Excellence, Fort Rucker. Her heart skipped a beat. She opened it slowly. Inside, a few lines. Candidacy accepted for Technical Operative Reinstatement Program. Report Monday, 8 o'clock hours. Northgate. Signature, Advanced Selections Command. Maya stood motionless. Then she took off her work jacket and went down to her garage. She opened the footlocker. Inside, the technical manual for the UH-60, her flight suit with the faded patches, and a homemade flight simulator built from military surplus parts. She connected the cables. Powered on the monitor. And began to fly. Monday morning. Fort Rucker, Alabama. Maya arrived on time. Helmet in hand. On her shoulders, her grandfather's old flight jacket. That jacket had flown over Vietnam in the 70s. It was her good luck charm. At the gate, a soldier gave her a skeptical look. The other recruits were young. New backpacks. Shiny helmets. Some were laughing. Others talked about their father the general or their uncle in the Air Force. Maya stayed apart. In the briefing room, orderly tables, powered on projectors, photos of the top graduates. Perfect uniforms. Fake smiles. No women. No one with tired eyes. Then Colonel Gianni Haskins walked in. Tall. Hard. Cold. Cadets, welcome. This isn't a course. It's a selection. And not all of you will pass. He walked between the desks, slow, making eye contact. He stopped in front of Maya. He looked at her worn-out jacket. The scratched helmet. The manual bound with duct tape. Some of you seem to have shown up by mistake. We'll find out soon enough. He walked back to the front of the room. Flying is not a right. It's a privilege. And not everyone deserves it. The exercises began the very next day. The cadets were divided into groups, assigned to the Black Hawk simulators. Cutting-edge technology. Realistic controls. Precise mechanical feedback. Maya was assigned to Station 7. One of the oldest. The software was slow. The controls were misaligned. The screen flickered. She said nothing. She sat down. Initiated the sequence. And completed the mission with the highest score. Haskins looked at the data. Paused. Probable system error. Repeat the test. Maya repeated it. Scored even higher. No comment. From that moment on, she was always there. At Station 7. Even when the others rotated stations, she didn't. Even when there were partner exercises, they paired her with the cadet who was furthest behind. The worst shifts? Always hers. The whispers started soon. Diversity hire. Affirmative action. Who pulled strings for her? One day, she found her locker moved to the far end of the room. Inside, a note written in pen. Tourist. Go back to the warehouse. She didn't react. But a few nights later, returning to her barracks, she found her flight suit, the one with the hand-sewn Aves patch, slashed clean across the chest. On the hook, another note. Get the message now? Maya stood still. No one in the locker room. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights. And distant laughter. She folded the suit calmly. Put it in her pack. And walked out. That night, she opened a box she kept under her bed. Inside were years of work. Technical reports. Simulations. And a document she had proposed multiple times. A protocol to correct a flaw in the NH-90's stabilization systems. Ignored. Dismissed. Never discussed. But she knew the problem was still there. And now, she knew something else. She had to be ready. If the chance to prove it ever came. It was the last Friday of the month. Fort Rucker was buzzing, a live demonstration exercise, with observers from the Pentagon and top brass from the Department of Defense. A chance to show off. But not for everyone. Maya was assigned to the operations tower. Monitoring instruments. No flight time. No exposure. Just silence. Among the pilots chosen for the exercise was Lieutenant Cody Evans. 26 years old. From Virginia. A general's son. He often spoke of his natural gifts as a pilot. That day, he would be flying solo in Delta IV, one of the most advanced US-60s in the fleet. At 10:07, 6 helicopters lifted off in formation. The rotors sliced the air with precision. Everything looked perfect. Maya watched the telemetry data. When Delta IV reached 10,000 feet, she noticed something. Minor fluctuations. Unstable parameters. Not serious enough to trigger an alarm. But to her, they were obvious. She opened the auxiliary comms channel. Delta IV, this is Tower. Advise maintaining current altitude. We are detecting secondary rotor instability. Haskins spun around. Reed, you are not cleared to communicate. Stand down. Sir, the data indicates, I said stand down. One more word and you're on the first bus home today. On the screen, the numbers got worse. Evans's voice crackled over the radio, strained, Tower. I'm feeling abnormal vibrations. Controls are getting heavy. Haskins, I scold, proceed according to the flight plan. It's normal turbulence. But it wasn't. The Black Hawk was entering destabilization. Just like in her protocol. It had happened before in simulations. And in a classified test back in 2018. No one had ever taken it seriously. Maya looked at Haskins. Then at her microphone. And she chose. She grabbed the emergency override. Opened the direct channel. Delta 4, listen only to my voice. Now, reduce right rotor power to 40%. Disengage lateral trim compensator. And do not touch the trim. I repeat, do not touch the trim. Silence. Then, Evans's voice, it's working. The roll is decreasing. I have partial control back. In the tower, Haskins turned, furious. Reed. You just violated a direct order. Give me that microphone, now. Maya remained motionless. Eyes fixed on the data. Colonel. If I hadn't intervened, that pilot would be a crater right now. Haskins took a step forward. But said nothing. Everyone in the room was frozen. No one dared to speak. On the screen, the parameters were stabilizing. The icon for Delta 4 was descending. Bianchi, on the radio, returning to safe altitude. I have visual on the emergency landing zone. Attempting to land. Maya didn't look away from the screen, maintain a gentle descent. Don't force the attitude. Crosswind from the northeast. Compensate, but don't overcorrect. Through the window, the helicopter was a distant speck. The Black Hawk came down low over the tall grass. The landing was hard, but controlled. The helicopter skidded for a few yards. Then stopped. Silence. Then, applause. Just one person, at first. Then another. Then everyone. Maya put down the microphone. She said nothing. Haskins stared at her. His voice tight with rage, if you think this saves you, you're wrong. You disobeyed, in front of witnesses. But before he could say more, another voice interrupted him, Colonel Haskins. It was General Thompson. He'd been present in the room. His tone was calm. But final. Warrant Officer Reed acted with skill and a level head. And she saved a life. He turned to her, tomorrow morning, 0800. I want to know how you did it. Be in my office. On time. Maya nodded. She said nothing. But inside. She knew one thing for certain, finally, someone was willing to listen. The next day, at 8 o'clock sharp, Maya stood before General Thompson's office. In her hand, a thick folder. Neat. Clean. Bound with a red band. Inside, there was more than just notes. There were years of ignored work. Data. Tests. Simulations. Official reports. And above all, one document, the Reed Protocol. A technical proposal to correct a real flaw in the stabilization systems of the UH-60. A dangerous flaw. But an underestimated one. She entered. Thompson was already there. Behind his desk, two senior officers. Warrant Officer Reed, he said, using her rank with respect for the first time. Explain. Maya didn't talk about herself. She talked about the problem. She explained how, years earlier, she had noticed fluctuations in post-maintenance data. How she had gathered evidence. Created simulations. Submitted reports. She also said that Haskins, then a section chief, had received the protocol. But had filed it away as not relevant. She handed him the folder. The general opened it. Scanned the documents. In silence. Then he turned to his colleagues. It's all here. Analysis, modification proposals, and even a simulation identical to yesterday's event. Silence in the room. One of the officers asked, and no one took any of this into consideration? Maya answered calmly, no, sir. I didn't have the right last name. The general didn't reply. But he stood up. He closed the folder. Warrant Officer, this material will go to the Technical Command Center by end of day. If confirmed, your protocol will be adopted as standard procedure. Maya lowered her gaze. Not out of humility. But to contain her emotion, one of the officers asked, "And Colonel Haskins?" Thompson's reply was curt, "Suspended. Effective immediately. An internal investigation will be launched." Maya didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. There was no need. That moment. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. In the months following the incident, something changed at Fort Rucker. There were no ceremonies. No headlines in the Army Times. But in the hallways, in the classrooms, in the control tower, you could feel something different. The Reed protocol was officially adopted. The simulators were updated. Every new pilot learned to handle the exact sequence that had nearly killed Cody Evans. Maya was appointed head of the technical training section. Never before, on that base, had a woman held that role. But no one dared to question it. The respect had come before the title. And yet, the real change wasn't her rank. Maya introduced 3 simple rules. First, simulator tests would be anonymous. Just code names, no names. Second, simulator stations would be rotated for everyone. Third, any cadet could propose technical modifications, but only if they were well documented. Not everyone agreed. Some grumbled. But then, the results spoke for themselves. One evening, while organizing documents in her new office, she went back to the locker room. She had to retrieve a box. On the door of her old locker, she found the old flight suit hanging. The one that had been slashed months earlier. Now, it was stitched back together. The thread was thick. Visible. But strong. No signature. No note. Just the act itself. Maya took it in her hands. She looked at it for a long time. And for the first time in years, her fingers trembled. Not from anger. Not from fear. But because, finally, she didn't have to defend herself from anyone. Maya Reed never sought revenge. She never wanted to be first. She just refused to be invisible. She spoke up when it was easier to be silent. She held on when it would have been simpler to disappear. And that quiet, unbreakable courage changed everything. Her name isn't engraved on a plaque of honor. But it appears at the bottom of every emergency protocol for the UH-60. In every classroom where they teach you not to ignore the signs. And in the entrance of the technical section, there's a gray wall. On that wall, hanging from 2 simple hooks, is her old flight suit. Stitched. Worn. But whole. Beneath it, a small, matte metal plaque. Engraved with only this: you don't need to be seen. You need to be heard. Have you ever been ignored? Underestimated? Sidelined? Even when you knew you were right? Share your story in the comments. You might help someone else find the courage not to give up. If this story moved you, leave a like, subscribe, and share it. Because even the quietest voices, when they choose to speak, can change everything. Thanks for listening to the end. We'll see you in the next video.